Hello and welcome in. I'm Dr. Jim Cellini. I'm a board-certified practicing veterinary neurologist. In my previous video, you may have seen me reacting to my testimony recently in the New Hampshire State Legislature. I drove up to New Hampshire and testified in general favor of a bill called HB 1102, which seeks to criminalize the breeding and the sale of what are called brachycephalic or flat-faced animals, so like bulldogs, for instance. I was generally in favor of the bill, though the bill was very flawed, and I did try to clarify some of those issues I had with it. But you can watch that previous video for me to kind of react and clarify some of my positions there. In this video, what I'm going to do is react to some of the testimony from some of the other people that are of a different opinion from mine. Let's just say it. So I'm going to react to the testimony of an HYSA rep, a breeder, and a veterinarian who's a breeder. And I'm going to basically just try to clarify some of the things that they say I think are either wrong or misguided, and just provide that information for you. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Good afternoon, Chair Aaron, members of the committee. My name is Stacy Ober. I am the New England Government Relations Manager for the American Kennel Club, and I am here to oppose House Bill 1102. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all this afternoon. I also want to take a moment and publicly thank the dog breeders and dog lovers behind me who have taken time from work, family obligations, and other commitments to be here this afternoon to be certain that you all have accurate information and a resource to ask these questions of those who are breeding dogs. I do want to note that I take exception to statements that have been made that breed registries are encouraging and breeders are chasing extreme conformation.
Well, that is my exact argument. So again, to clarify what my argument is, and I mentioned this in the previous video, the breed standards for many of these brachycephalic flat-faced breeds call for extreme features. And if they don't outright call for them, like in the French Bulldog or the English Bulldog, they certainly encourage them through pictures saying this is correct, this is incorrect. I'll put the pictures up here of a Boston Terrier from the Boston Terrier Breed Club. But that is my position, is that the breed standard creates an incentive and a set of instructions, the Bible, as she calls it here in a second, to create a dog who's going to be predisposed to a slew of health problems. Probably the most important of those problems being a condition called BOAS, which stands for brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome. Okay. And just to review what BOAS is, it's basically this. We take a normal dog with a normal muzzle, we accordion all of that tissue. The soft tissues inside the muzzle and the throat don't shrink down like the bones do. Okay. And when that happens, air can't get through their airway, through their nostrils down to their lungs. There's a lot of turbulence. That's why you hear a lot of these bulldogs snoring and snorting, having sleep apnea and choking, things like that. So that issue is very serious, and it's due to the fact that we're smashing their muzzles to their head and making a very flat face. It's literally due to that, and it's literally called brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome. There's a reason you don't see it in collies and Labradors, right? So, all right, let's keep going.
That is a mischaracterization of the American Kennel Club. So I want to take a moment to do a little bit of a dive on who is the American Kennel Club, what do we do, and whether or not New Hampshire has a problem with pet-related suffering. I have shared, for instance, with you all, I had asked the parent clubs of some of the brachycephalic breeds to, in fact, submit a statement to the committee to help educate the committee about their breed standard. And it's really the Bible that they use in order to ensure that their breeding programs are being undertaken responsibly for the purpose of not only preserving breed characteristics and producing healthy, well-socialized, purebred puppies, but...
So this is another problem I have, is that the incentives that the breeders, the breed clubs, the ethical preservation breeders, whatever term you want to use, the breeders want to preserve what is a current model of creating these dogs by their, in my opinion, flawed, very flawed breed standard. That is the entire problem. They think they got it right a long time ago in creating some sort of breed standard, but in my opinion, they got it very wrong. And what we're seeing today is a result of that.
Our affiliated clubs, I've shared with you that AKC is a club of clubs. And we have more than 200 affiliated parent clubs that are responsible for the individual recognized breeds. So the second handout that's going around is a public education tool that we use to help the public understand more about the breeds. When you open it up, it has all of the recognized AKC breeds as the centerfold. So it's one example of the public education that we engage in to ensure that the public has the right information in choosing the right pet for them. The parent clubs actually develop and approve the breed's official standard, which is a written description of the ideal specimen of their breed by describing its structure, temperament, and instincts.
Look how malformed this skeleton is and how underbit, if that's a word, this jaw is. Okay. We're trying to preserve and keep the practice of creating dogs with malformations, guys. This is a malformation. All right. So, again, this was created through artificial selection and breeding and inbreeding. This is viewed as some sort of purity, okay, by people on that side of the argument. I don't get it, and I don't understand why they can't look at this and see a malformation, all the health problems that comes with it, and think, well, let's just change this a little bit and make this more moderate. I cannot wrap my head around it, but let's keep going.
On rare occasion, the club may make revisions. So I wanted to, for the record, clarify that in fact, breed parent clubs, it's not the breed registry. AKC is the largest purebred dog registry that maintains a registry, but it is the parent club that owns the standard for their breed.
Now it sounds to me like she's trying to like absolve the AKC of having a hand in this, which I get what she's saying. Like I think she's saying that the AKC is just a club of clubs. Those are her words, and they don't set the breed standard. So I think she's trying to clarify, like, hey guys, if you're talking about breed standard, you need to deal with the breed clubs, not necessarily us. I would argue that they don't really, encourage any change. They kind of just go with it unnecessarily, in my opinion. But I think she's trying to separate the AKC a little bit from the breed clubs in this regard.
And it is rare that they will change the standard. In the packet that I distributed to you all, for instance, I'd really appreciate you turning to halfway through is a statement from the Bulldog Club of America, for instance, and they have provided the committee with an update with regard to their standard was adopted in 1896.
Now, do we really think that in the year 1896, before Henry Ford created the Model T and before the Titanic sank, we got it right with the creation of bulldogs and we just created the ideal specimen in 1896?
It was amended in 1976, in 1990, reformatted to conform. Description of the gait was moved from the beginning to the end, so a technical change. And in 2016, it was amended 8 years ago to add a disqualification for certain colors. And what we know is that certain colors are genetic introduction into pure.
So in 120 some odd years, if I have that math right, we only changed the breed standard a couple of times, despite all the health problems that we know that bulldogs have. That's all we've done to the breed standard. Does that tell you that it was perfect or that they're perhaps not listening to anybody?
Purebred bulldogs, for example, can introduce health problems. For instance, the merle color can contribute to deafness.
Oh my God. See, this is already making me eye roll. So for some reason, breeders and people on her side of the aisle are obsessed with merle and introducing the merle coloration into breeds. And you would think that this is the same as introducing a Ebola virus into the breeds. This obsession with merle, I don't know why they are so hung up on merle. Merle Haggard, when you breed merle dogs, like a merle dog to a merle dog, it can create a lot of issues with like congenital deafness and blindness and other syndromes that are serious. I mean, don't get me wrong, but this is not what we see dogs dying from in the ICU across the country and the world on a daily basis. Okay. This is not the current problem facing these breeds. Okay. So again, Merle Haggard, I'm going to keep calling it Merle Haggard. Merle is like, again, it's not good to breed Merle dogs together. I get that, but we have to take a step back and be like, okay, how much are we going to care about coat coloration here versus if the dog can freaking breathe or not? Like, can we get our priorities straight? Maybe.
For instance. So that would be the reason. It would be a health related reason as to why the parent club would actually make a change to their breed standard.
Now, if that's true, then why aren't they making the change to the breed standard to make bulldogs' muzzles longer and lower the risk of brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome?
AKC strongly opposes the breeding of dogs by those who would do so without regard for the animal's welfare. And I wanted to mention all of the things that AKC does to stand up for dogs. We have an online canine college to teach responsible breeding with practical step-by-step approaches. By joining one of our clubs, breeders learn about the health and welfare topics, and they get mentored and share experience by others in the breed. The Canine Health Foundation is funded by our clubs and has provided more than 68 million in canine health research that benefits all dogs.
To me, that I think brings up an issue of conflict of interest, though I'm sure that there is plenty of good research that has been done, don't get me wrong, but that seems to be a conflict of interest when you've got the source of funding is an institution that really refuses to change.
And we applaud the efforts of all the scientists and veterinarians who continue to work to advance canine health research and education.
Even mine?
This is a developmental process and improvement and progress, but never is there perfection. I will acknowledge that. We also have a breeder of merit program that recognizes breeders who certify that their breeding stock has been tested in accordance with the parent club's guidelines. We support future veterinarians.
So just so you know, the testing that the parent clubs recommend involves things that are, I would say, minimal at best. You can pull up health testing guidelines for, let's say, the French Bulldog. There's nothing about herniated discs and there's nothing about BOAS on there or spinal malformations. They're certainly not mandatory.
We support future veterinarians study in theriogenology, which is the branch of veterinary medicine concerned with obstetrics, physiology, and diseases of animal reproductive systems. Why is that? In my testimony, you'll see that it is rare that a school of veterinary medicine actually includes and requires the study of small animal theriogenology.
We had to learn that. I went to the University of Georgia in 2009, graduated in 2009, and we had theorio classes. I did not like them very much. I didn't see any future for me in that field, especially after watching the instructor collect semen on a Newfoundland in real time. I knew theorio was not for me, but aside from that, yeah, I mean, I guess I can see what she's saying. Like, it's probably good to have that covered if it's not covered that much these days. You know, I've been out of school for 15 years. You can see how that would be an improvement in the overall curriculum.
Last, in terms of what the scope of the problem is, I have submitted to the committee. I did a public information request with the New Hampshire Attorney General's office and asked for all of the pet-related complaints over the last 3 years. And I've given a brief summary of the results. There were 4 online scams from January 1st, 2021 to January 1st, 2024. Those were infectious disease or individuals who made payments online and never received a pet. One cat breeder.
I think your time.
So they cut her off right there, but she's making a I guess you would call it a false equivalency. I mean, she's saying that because only a small number of people filed complaints to the Attorney General's office, that somehow there must not be a problem with these dogs being unhealthy. But I guarantee you, if I start asking every client that I see over the next, I don't know, year, if, hey, did you know that you can file a complaint with the Attorney General's office about a faulty dog that you purchased from a breeder, they'd be like, no, I had no idea. That seems like a really not very useful piece of information.
Can I have her finish? Because I think it's you only have a couple more.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm just summarizing.
I just want to hear what
statistics.
Yes. Just
Okay, sure. Would you please?
Thank you for the question, Representative.
Let us know. The
yes, and I'll just be brief. There were 4 online scams. I know we've talked about that in this committee before. There was one New Hampshire cat breeder that sold a Maine Coon cat. that was diagnosed with a viral infection, and they got a replacement animal that also had an infectious disease. There are 4 complaints against New Hampshire pet stores, and there was one New Hampshire dog breeder. Individual bought 2 French bulldogs. The complaint said the seller was without a New Hampshire license and had a criminal record, and one of the dogs was diagnosed with a congenital heart condition. So I wanted the committee to know that
Heard
of
that
all the
many
data from the
times.
New Hampshire Attorney General's office, the Department of Justice on consumer protection, those were the all of the complaints that had been submitted under the consumer protection law here in New Hampshire. None of them refer to respiratory suffering or ailments.
Yeah. So this is a complete false equivalency, I think is the term you would use for this. First of all, I promise you that if I went around and asked my clients, hey, did you know that if your dog is sick and you've just got it from a breeder and it's sick, like a sick puppy, or it develops some sort of problem in its early life stages, you can file a complaint with the Attorney General? Like, no, I didn't even know that. Like, so to say that just because a low number of people have filed a complaint, I would argue that it's because they have no idea that you can even do that. That doesn't speak to the actual problems here.
Suffering or ailments here in New Hampshire. So I hope that's helpful to the committee.
So by that logic, she's saying that, well, there has been no brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome reported in New Hampshire because people didn't report it to the Attorney General. Like, that doesn't make any sense at all.
So what you're saying is that there has not been anybody who's bought a Frenchie or Shih Tzu or a boxer that has had any kind of problems as a result of its breed or breeder that has made a complaint to the New Hampshire Attorney General's office?
Just the one that I mentioned.
Just the one.
I
And this
think
is
what
over-
because you heard earlier.
Yeah, you can't, I mean, in my opinion, you can't use this like, well, we haven't gotten any complaints from the Attorney General. Like, what does that even mean? That has nothing to do with the surveillance of these dogs' health at large.
Hear that people spend a lot of money on pets these days. If there had been issues, I think it's likely that people would pursue action through under the consumer protection laws, which is why I requested the data. I've heard the committee often ask if anyone has the data on a particular problem that a bill is trying to solve. So
No, again, this is a completely, I think it's a false equivalency is the name of it. But again, clients just don't know about this. Okay. They don't even know this is an option. I promise you.
did submit a Freedom of Information request.
Okay, so you're suggesting that there is no problem with this kind of breeding going on in New Hampshire?
I'm saying the data from the Attorney General's office suggests that there is not, correct?
Okay. Yeah. If you select data only from the Attorney General's office to tell you this, then yes, you have a lot of bias because your data set is inherently flawed. It's like if I chose to look for brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome in the collie breed with like a giant long muzzle. Oh, I didn't see any. Yeah, because I'm looking in collies.
And I appreciate you consolidating all of your sub clubs information and input. I haven't read it. In your knowledge, in these standards by all of your 200 sub clubs, is there anything prohibiting the breeding of animals that are suffering in some way?
All of these clubs have ethical requirements to be a member of the club. So yes. And let's not
What does
forget
that even
the
mean? Ethical
members of these
requirements?
clubs. I'd like to say that veterinarians have knowledge about animals that is a mile wide. The members of these parent clubs have knowledge about their particular breed that is a mile deep in terms of the genetics. They're studying pedigrees. They're funding the genetic research that you heard earlier to ensure that.
I would argue that veterinarians of different specialties have knowledge that is a mile deep. And if you stack all of those veterinarians together, you get a combination of a mile deep and a mile wide.
They're funding the genetic research that you heard earlier to ensure that they can improve upon the breed. They are preservation breeders. They have invested their time, money, commitment, passion. and producing healthy dogs. That's who these parent club members are. So I appreciate the opportunity to.
I would argue that that's what they view themselves as, but from what I would say the vast majority of my veterinarian colleagues see is a faulty breed standard that creates some dogs that are okay, they make it through their inherent disability, and many, many, many dogs who don't and suffer a lifetime of discomfort, pain, difficulty breathing, you name it, as a direct result of that practice. Many, many, many dogs who don't and suffer a lifetime of discomfort, pain, difficulty breathing, you name it, as a direct result of that practice.
Correct the record in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Potenza.
So kind of piggybacking on what Representative Creighton said, based upon all the breeders that you have, would you said in your testimony that there's a certain characteristic and it would be like color that would show if it's deviating from the breed that would then impact other health. Explain that, because you're saying just literally like a marking could show that, okay, well, that could then cause other different types of deformity.
Sure. In the packet, for instance, probably at the end, because I believe they're alphabetical, the Pekingese Club of America, for instance, that breed has been around for 1,000 years. And they're communicating to the committee when I reviewed their statement that at this point, they have one of the healthiest breeds because they have not introduced other breeds or factors into the pedigree. And therefore, they have over time been able to eliminate health issues altogether. So they're.
Yeah, I mean, come on. They've been able to eliminate health issues altogether.
Can be bad actors who will promote publicly, for instance, and it would be, I think, a buyer beware sign if you saw someone that was marketing rare or exotic color bulldog or a designer breed. Typically, that means this is someone that is not breeding to the standard. They are selling, basically something that is not a purebred, but they're hoping to get additional money by virtue of calling it exotic or rare colored or things of this nature. And that's essentially what they've done, is created a mixed breed.
So again, it's not that I necessarily disagree with her on this issue of color in dogs and this exotic, use. I am no fan of like exotic bully breeding and these, insanely malformed breeds like those. But this is just like shifting the blame off to, the ever-present unethical breeder, not us, it's them, sort of thing. And I think this loses the point, which again I'll make. The breed standard calls for extreme features in many cases.
Dog. And so, even when you look, for instance, at the Bulldog Club of America, they've provided for you two pictures, one of what bulldogs looked like back in the 1800s and what they look like today, in confirmation with the breed standard of the Bulldog Club of America. So they've provided pictures for you as well as to what a bulldog looks like.
Follow up. So these, let's say bad actors.
I'd like to point out that research has shown that when bulldogs are anesthetized for any reason, they have about a 4% chance of dying across the board. And that may not seem like a lot, but you don't want to go under anesthesia if you have a 4% chance of dying. And that is directly related to their conformation, their breathing issues, and all the issues that come secondary to having an inability to move air through a flattened muzzle.
Let's say bad actors that are designer, the things that you just said, would not be incorporated into your association, correct?
That's correct. They're likely licensed if they're following New Hampshire laws, because you have to have a health certificate to transfer an animal and whatnot. But there's fraud out there, as there is in other industries. So I'm just acknowledging that as a thing that exists.
So would you say that the position of your organization, because I think the most compelling thing out of the testimony from the sponsor is this picture in the back here about, you have one picture of the dog that's literally got no face and then one that has, like, would you say that the position of your organization is to not be cutting things short in that? Would you say that you guys are going towards more of what things looked like maybe 50
What-
years ago?
What I'm trying to say is that the breed standards have not recently changed to accommodate cuteness or appearance.
Okay.
We have been committed and invested in
No, but the breed standards have led to this, because if you keep trying to make the dog with the features listed under these breed standards, you will inevitably create more and more extreme features, because that's what you're trying to do in the first place.
preserving these breeds for generations and ensuring their health by funding the research and all the rest. So I haven't been privy to the picture that you've been shown, but I am encouraging you to look at the Bulldog Club of America's pictures, because earlier the statement was made that, for instance, bulldogs now have shorter legs or whatnot. So I'm just acknowledging there are pictures there for you from bulldogs 100 years ago and what they look like today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Oh, Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick follow-up on Representative
Sure.
Hendon.
Go ahead.
I'll describe this to you. So this dog on the left has a very flat face. This one has a very prominent muzzle. Does that mean that one of these would be rejected from your club because it doesn't match the picture in the blue flyer that you sent us?
What a judge is doing is evaluating those dogs in the ring and how closely they conform to the ideal standard that is described in the parent breed club's standard description. I think you would be
So this brings up a whole other issue that I have an issue with. These dogs will oftentimes get rewarded and named best in show or whatever award system you want to name it. These judges will encourage dogs with more extreme features. She's mentioning it right there. A dog could easily have more of a muzzle, which would lower its risk of breathing successfully on average. And a judge will look at it in the ring, ignore that very important health aspect, and award another dog with a completely flat face because it just confines to the breed standard more. So we're giving out awards for more malformed, more at-risk types of conformations in dogs. That's another huge problem that I have.
hard pressed to find a standard that says that it should have a flattened nose or recently changed to say these extreme appearance.
I can literally find that standard. Just right now, go to the French Bulldog Club of America. It's right there.
Are what's being sought. I think that's a mischaracterization and misinforms the committee in making that type of statement.
No, that is not misinformation. Read the breed standard. That's all you have to do. It tells you to make dogs with very, very flattened faces. It literally says that. It's in the book. All right, we're going to skip ahead now. This is a veterinarian who is a breeder of French Bulldogs. I'm going to react to her testimony. All right. Here is a veterinarian who is I believe a Bulldog breeder, a Boston Terrier breeder, one of the two. Try that again. All right. This is a veterinarian who is a breeder who opposes the bill and is on the opposite side of the aisle of me. So let's listen to her testimony and I'll react to it.
FBI agent. I'm an AKC breeder of merit. I have been in emergency and critical care as well as a general practitioner veterinarian for 22 years, and I'm a court-qualified expert in matters related to canine health, breeding, purebred dog ownership and registration, as well as animal cruelty and abuse in multiple jurisdictions. I've participated in cases about animal abuse, cruelty, and neglect across the country, and I currently contract with the New Hampshire Stratum SPCA as a veterinarian for this purpose. In fact, I was at a meeting 3 days ago with them, and that they also oppose this bill. I have devoted my life to the health and welfare of animals, and my life revolves around dogs, both personally and professionally. I'm vehemently opposed to this bill, and it is a bill full of erroneous assumptions and unforeseen consequences. Reputable breeders do know their pedigrees and conduct recommended health testings and do their best to produce healthy dogs. It is preposterous to tell me that by breeding a healthy dog, I'm committing animal abuse, potentially a felony, by virtue of an ill-defined term alluding to a phenotypic head shape. There is no standard definition of brachycephaly, and I've given you some research to support that.
I don't disagree with that. Brachycephaly, I said in my testimony, it's like calling something round. Soccer ball's round, but it's not a perfect sphere, right? There's qualities of this. There's a spectrum of brachycephaly. A boxer dog is considered brachycephalic, but that dog's muzzle and skull conformation isn't anywhere near what you would see with like a completely absent muzzled pug.
It does describe a wide variation in the appearance of skull, and equating that brachycephaly with a deformity or animal cruelty is misinformed and not true.
I would associate it with a deformity. I would not say that it's always indicative of animal cruelty, which is why I cautiously supported the bill, but wasn't totally all in on it.
Brachycephaly is not only seen in domestic species, but it also occurs as a natural adaptation in species to its environment.
Yeah, so if it occurs naturally, then that's natural selection and evolution has led to that conformational change. That is not the case in dogs. Show me a wolf or a wild dog that is brachycephalic walking around like what you would see a French bulldog looking like. It's not a thing. Okay. So, yes, if it happens in nature, so be it. But that's not the case with dogs. We did this to them artificially. This was artificial selection.
Occurs in sheep, goats, cattle, horses, birds, pigs, rabbits, dogs, cats, and even human, and it is not always pathologic.
Yeah, but oftentimes it is. And the question is, should we be breeding intentionally with this conformational change?
SB 1102 could extend to other species as well. There are a lot of studies out there that will discuss the implications of BOAS and other health problems with brachycephaly. The problem isn't with brachycephaly itself, it's with any trait in an animal that occurs in the extreme.
No, the B in BOAS stands for brachycephalic. Okay. We don't see BOAS in Labradors, Collies, Golden Retrievers. It's literally the first word in the syndrome is called brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome. So it is brachycephalic dog.
I would respectfully tell you that the neurologist who testified, he sees a very biased population. He's a specialist. He doesn't see the general pet population. I would tell you that most of
That's why in my testimony, I made it very clear that when you breed brachycephalic dogs and aim to make extremely short muzzled dogs, you will have many dogs that are fine and overcome that disability, but you will also have many, many dogs who are very ill and have a lifetime of suffering. I am trying to quote like research studies and, provide scientific data here when I make these arguments. And I'm not really, other than providing just like my personal experiences, I'm not providing an argument that's based on what I see. And in fact, I would argue that if she's in support of creating brachycephalic dogs and sees a bunch of healthy ones and that's it, then she has the same bias in the opposite direction.
the brachycephalic animals that I see in practice over my 22 years do not suffer from these. And it certainly isn't a 90% occurrence in any breed. I have research as well that supports that for you.
So again, you can quote studies. Studies range from anywhere about 45 to 90% of brachycephalic dogs struggle with BOAS or have symptoms of BOAS, but it depends on what breeds you're lumping in there and considering brachycephalic. Your dogs like French bulldogs, for instance, and pugs, English bulldogs, they're going to have a much, much, much higher incidence than like a boxer.
Breeding also refers to not just putting two dogs together or two animals together, but also the production of those animals. So if I breed two non-affected animals and come up with an affected animal, I could still be held accountable under this law.
Yes, and I see what she's saying. However, if you breed two Labradors together, you're not going to get a brachycephalic dog, at least not in any sort of regularity.
That's the way I interpreted it. So this would essentially stop me from ever breeding a dog in the state of New Hampshire again. So that is concerning to me. The other issue that I left with you, if I can just have one comment, is
Sure.
that there's a study that I did reference in my testimony that discusses the impact of an educational intervention on public perception of brachycephalic dogs. And it showed that 97% of people, after given proper educational tools about the problems that can happen, not that do always happen, had a much better understanding of it and were more informed. And it is not the skull that equates with the dog's problem. It's the openness of their nostrils and other ratios in their neck and girth.
So again, this is something that breeders like to quote. They like to say that the length of the dog's muzzle and the flatness of their face has somehow nothing to do with this airway issue and the ability for the dogs to get air through their airways and into their lungs. That is a complete mischaracterization of the research that has shown that as you decrease the length of the muzzle, the risk of BOAS goes up, which I'll provide right here. This is a study from, I believe, 2015 from Dr. Packer, Rona Packer. There are other things that when you look at only the extreme brachycephalic dogs, things like the girth of their neck and how narrow their nostrils are, yes, within that strata, those problems are huge issues. And once your muzzle is already next to nothing, there's no difference between next to nothing and nothing. So another study by Dr. Liu showed that if you're down in the realm of like super, super tiny muzzles, there's no difference between barely anything and literally nothing. Okay. Thus, a lot of people like to use that study and say, oh, the muzzle length doesn't matter. That's not what they showed. They showed other factors, yes, but it's everything. It's the conglomerate of making a dog with these facial and skull features that gives them this such difficulty breathing, this BOAS condition.
Brachycephalic breeds, yes. Do they have BOAS? Sure. Do they have other issues? Sure. But it doesn't mean by virtue of their breed or the brachycephaly that they're going to have it. They're correlated, but they're not necessarily caused by that. The idea that
Yes, I mean, like I said before, I think I agree with her in that not 100% of brachycephalic dogs will have some massive health issue, but nobody's really arguing that either. We're just arguing the practice of creating more and more of these brachycephalic animals. And even if it's, which it probably is, like 25% of them have some severe issue, it's millions of dogs.
idea that by having a dog with a flatter skull, that it's necessarily going to have this. No, their body weight it determines whether they can regulate their body temperature much
Yeah, and they can't keep a low body weight if they can't exercise because they can't breathe well enough to exercise in the first place.
more so. The studies that I've given you show that the number one contributor is not the length of their muzzle, but yet their body weight and their girth of their neck.
So again, as I mentioned before, this is just not a proper interpretation of the studies and the research provided. I've shown the study a million times. Read it for yourself. It's published in, I believe, 2015 by Dr. Packer. If you look at dogs, as the length of their muzzle decreases, the risk of BOAS exponentially rises.
I mean, these are scientific studies, and I just don't. 90% of Frenchies do not have BOAS. I'm sorry, I don't know where those statistics come from. I've done my research.
The correct percentage is probably about 50%. But again, you can find studies that quote anywhere between 45 to I've read 90%, depending on the study that you cite.
To again, we're talking about just dogs. Actually, we've been talking all day. Dogs with brachycephaly, but are there any other and is this really a deformity?
No.
No, it
It
is not.
occurs in nature.
No, it does not occur in wild wolves or dogs, to my knowledge. Okay. Just because it occurs in a bat or some other species, it's got nothing to do with dogs. And again, even if it did, it got there through natural selection, not artificial selection and breeding.
In my testimony, I talk about birds. People, I mean, animals adapt to their environment. Now, certainly brachycephaly in an extreme case can be bred to be undesirable, but animals are naturally brachycephalic in undomesticated species as well as domesticated species, and they do have adaptations that occur based on their environment.
Mhm.
And so, no, it is a descriptor and not a deformity or condition.
Mhm.
Absolutely not. It's
In dogs, I would argue that it is.
absolutely not. It's not recognized in any veterinary textbook as an abnormality.
Now, that is completely false. I don't know where she's coming up with that statement that brachycephaly is not listed as a problem in veterinary textbooks.
Are there any other breathing disorders? I mean, aside from asthma kind of
Mhm.
things, that are traits of certain other animals?
There are a lot of breathing disorders that are traits in many animals. Feline asthma is one of them.
She literally just said, like, besides asthma.
So that's a condition that's very, not related to brachycephaly, but it is a condition that's common. You know, animals have pulmonary disease for a wide variety, infectious reasons, tick-borne reasons. I mean, there are many things that could cause breathing difficulties. But
Yeah, and if you were intentionally breeding asthma into cats, you'd probably stop.
and I think we're overly focused on breathing because there's just
Well, breathing is very important.
so many disorders in animals that can occur based on a breed. It's, you know, based on any breed, even non-breed. I mean, you can take like the doodles are not purebred. Everybody loves doodles. Those are some of the most unhealthy animals I see.
That is a complete falsehood. Doodles are not any more or less unhealthy or healthy compared to any other breed. If you try to tell me that doodles are way less healthy than French bulldogs, I mean, seriously, like, you're not living in reality in terms of veterinary medicine. Um, yeah, I don't know where that comes from.
They all have skin allergies. I mean, almost all of them, and their owners are spending thousands of dollars. They're on chronic medication.
I've literally seen so many doodles for various neurologic problems, mind you, and I can't remember the last time one had a skin problem. Okay. Now, if we're going to bring up case bias, like she brought up my inherent bias as a neurologist, and she's trying to tell me that, well, everyone she sees has skin problems. Well, that's because you're in general practice and you're seeing things like skin problems. That's why.
So, you know, the general population is not the extreme that you're being presented here today. And I just really want you to understand 22 years as an emergency vet, I don't think that I have seen 10 Boaz affected dogs to the point where they were suffering and dying.
Okay, this is probably the biggest just falsehood that I think I've ever heard a vet say under testimony. If you ask any emergency vet right now, when's the last time you saw a dog with Boaz? They'd probably say today during my shift. That is just that is numerically impossible. 22 years in ER and you've never seen more than 10 Boaz cases? You mean to tell me you see a Boaz case once every 2 years on average? Like, where do you work? That's like me saying I haven't seen a seizure case in over 10 years. Okay, I'm a neurologist. Ask any emergency vet, any small animal emergency vet who's been working since, I don't know, 5 years, the last 5 years. Ask them, when's the last time you saw a Boaz case? Again, this obstructive airway syndrome. They'll probably say, today I saw one. How you could possibly try to insinuate that you would see one Boaz case every 2 years working as an emergency veterinarian? Again, please, if you're watching this, find an emergency vet that you know and ask them this. When's the last time you saw a Boaz case? And see what they say. This is if I could have objected to one thing in this entire 4-hour testimony that I sat through, it would have been this. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up right there. This video is getting kind of long. There's more testimony that happened here, which I can react to if you want me to. But I think those were two of the bigger ones I wanted to provide my opinions on. So again, hope you like this video. Let me know in the comments below if you agree or disagree with anything I said, and I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.